Welcome back to the Choosing Known podcast. I'm Laura-Catherine Etheridge, and I am very glad to be back with you today. Today we're going to launch into our first conversation about this series, How to Know God, as we begin to look at the different attributes of God, His names, His characteristics. That's where we're headed. And today I have with me Camille to begin to unpack this series. So welcome back, Camille.
Thank you. Great to be here. Nice to join you today. Look forward to this very much.
Yeah, so I thought before we begin to actually talk about the various attributes, I thought it'd be neat to just stop and sort of explore, why does this even matter? Why when we think about a relationship with God, why would we want to think about or spend time around His various attributes, His names, what makes that important? And so I thought we'd spend time today really beginning to look at that and think about that. As you think about your own relationship with God, why or how has that helped you, like when you've known His actual attributes?
It's a great question. I think just the whole concept of God is often quite mysterious.
Yeah.
We use the word God a lot, but there are lots of gods. There are lots of world religions. There are lots of cultural gods that we have in our society. So, when you start talking about God, which God are you talking about? And what are His attributes? So we're talking about, the God of the Bible. We're talking about the creator of heaven and earth. And God is not just some, force out there in the universe. He's not many of the caricatures that we have of Him. Like, He's not the big Santa Claus in the sky that just gives you whatever you want. He's not the old angry man in the sky with a stick who's just waiting to beat you for every little mistake you make. There are just so many different caricatures out there about God. So to know His attributes and to know what He's like and how the Bible describes Him is super important. And God is a relational being who chooses and wants to have relationship with us. And so knowing His attributes helps us to experience who He really is. I mentioned this in the podcast about my story.
Yeah.
But listening to a book by John Mark Comer called God Has a Name, it just was a reinforcement to me of how important it is to know how God has described Himself. He actually described Himself to Moses on Mount Sinai, and he talked about who He was.
Yeah.
And so knowing His attributes helps us to experience Him personally and to understand more of who He is.
Well, and I think about something that you and I talk about sometimes in just our passing conversations about how we also all have a picture of who He is already. I don't think sometimes we think about that, but there's already a picture, and you're talking about some of the ones in our culture, the Santa Claus God, there's all these visions of Him, that are out there in our culture in this day and age, but we also have one. And a lot of what shapes our current picture, if we think about God, is our own experiences, and naturally so.
Exactly right.
Or things we've heard in relationships that we're in and people that we have been around. We have this image of Him, and it's often not until maybe we read things like John Mark Comer's book, or even like I can remember a couple of years ago I was reading A.W. Tozer's books about the attributes of God, and he explores those, and I think sometimes when we look at those, it helps us to begin to look, almost become even aware of like, wow, I didn't see God that way. I guess I saw him more like this, but I may not realize that I'm seeing Him that way until I'm looking at something that helps me double click on this attribute of His to realize, yeah, I don't see Him that way, much less maybe relate to Him in that way. So it's like we need to sometimes slow down and dive into those.
Absolutely.
A little bit. Yeah.
It's really funny because when you talk with little children, they also have their kind of their picture of who who God is, depending on how they're raised and in which religion they're raised.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting just to even see at a young age, people are already forming their images. I remember reading this book called, something about the way that children see God. And, there were like these little sample prayers, and one kid said, Jesus, I got a new pair of shoes this week. What do you think of them? Can you see them? Or, Lord, I prayed for a sister and I got a puppy. What's up with that?
I think I remember seeing some of this too. But they're so real.
But they're very real,
Yes.
and kids are even at a young age can start relating to who they think God is and where is he, and is he close? Is he distant? Is he funny? Is he kind? Is he good? What's he like?
Yeah.
So it's very natural, and so this whole area of knowing who he is and his attributes takes us out of just the mind, because it's, we can study a lot about God.
Yes.
And I mean, I have studied God. I took, Old Testament, New Testament. I studied systematic theology.
Well, and you've done it. I mean, when you say that, for our audience to know, this is advanced studies. This is not just, I did like an online course. I mean, you did real studies.
And it was, at the graduate level.
Yes.
And so I dug deep, and you can study all of these different theologies and, the theology of sin, the theology of evil, the theology of salvation, the theology of the church, the theology of eschatology. I mean, all of these things you can study, and it's all about God. But many times it just stays in the head.
Yeah.
And that, of course, that's the danger.
Yes.
Because when we're talking about the attributes of God, we want to talk about the God who can be known. The God who chooses to reveal himself to humanity, the Father God who sent his son Jesus to the earth to take on flesh and become fully God, fully human, and who totally gets us.
Yes.
The Holy Spirit who was sent to be our comforter after the death and resurrection of Christ, a real person.
Yes.
God is a real person.
Yes.
And so to get to know him, we have to look at, well, what's he like?
Yes.
How can I find out what he's like?
Yes.
How can I experience him like that?
Well, and sometimes I think about too, you're not going to be able to, I mean, we'd be crazy. You're not going to be able to trust somebody you don't know.
Right.
Like I couldn't do that with a normal person. How in the world could I do that with God? If I don't know you,
Right.
I'm really not mentally well to trust you if I don't know you. And if I don't know you and I don't trust you, there's no way I can love you.
No. Or trust. Or there's no basis for a relationship.
No, there really isn't. And so it's like really to grow when we say, well, I want to have intimacy with God, or I want to grow in my relationship with God, or I want to know God. Part of that, not all of it, but part of it is that we begin to look at, well, who are you?
Exactly right.
And what are you really like? And not just in my own experience, but we're very blessed with the Bible. We get to see a lot of stories and examples of like, who is God and what is he like? And then as we know that, like you're saying, it gets past the mind and it begins to get down into the more holistic part of who we are, into our emotion, into our physical feelings of like, do I even open up?
Right.
Even like last episode, you were saying, yeah, I mean, in my quiet times that I spend with the Lord on the back porch, I have learned to just be more real with him. And a lot of that is now, after walking with the Lord for a number of years, the more you've walked with him, it sounds like the more, now I'm more real, and I'm more real even in things that are hard. Like, here's the attitude I have today, or here's how I feel today. And it's not always the one you would want to be able to say, maybe.
Right.
It's like, no, this is just how it is. But it's because you also know who he is, it sounds like. So you feel like I can open up to you and be honest, and you're not going to shame me or be an unsafe place for me to be this way.
Yes. And the other thing, Laura-Catherine, is that I think I love, your podcast series, and I know you've got a lot of plans for it. But the Bible is just God's story.
Yes.
from the beginning to the end, it's just simply the story of God.
Yes.
And how he created humanity and how we're invited to be part of the story. And throughout that story, it's the same consistent character of who he is.
Yes.
You know, a lot of times today, there's a misconception that the God of the Old Testament is the angry, mean God. The God of the New Testament is just the loving God. You know, nothing could be further from the truth.
No.
It's one God, consistent in his character, yet in the New Testament, you know, Jesus comes and he's come in as a human being, and he's revealing who the Father is in person, up close. You know, how Jesus lived his life for those 33 years. What are the things that he did? We read the 4 Gospels, and we read these different snapshots of how Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John encountered Jesus, how they experienced him, what they witnessed. But even the way they're writing it from their lens, like their perspective. But it's just a beautiful way to begin to unpack these wonderful, you know, who is this God that we serve and we love and we want to know? What's he like? And he has given us many, many snapshots of himself throughout his story.
Yes. Yeah. And it'll be fun because on here, we're going to spend, for all of you watching, we're going to spend time each episode taking one of those attributes or names of him, talking a little bit about it.
Right.
And then we're going to go into one of the actual stories or snapshots in the Bible and see that in motion.
Yes.
So it's not just this standalone thing. It's like, let's learn about what is that, but then how is God when God is that way? How does that play out in the Bible? And then even talking about some of that in our own lives.
Exactly,
like,
right.
How have we experienced him? How have we learned to maybe relate with him differently, knowing that about him?
Right.
We're going to use both of those. What do you like about that way of doing it?
I love it because it's integrated.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not just the mind. Like, I can memorize a list of God's attributes.
Yes.
You know, in this book I was listening to yesterday, the audio book, you know, it talks about, you know, usually when we talk about who God is, we start with the omnis, you know, omnipresent, you know, omnipotent, you know, so all knowing, all present, you know, all infinite. You know, we start with the omnis. And that sounds great, and it's all true. But like, what does that mean in my everyday life? What does that look like, right? Who is this God? And so many times as I've studied about God, I've memorized, you know, okay, here's a list of his attributes. Here, I even used to teach it this way. I don't teach it this way anymore. I used to start with the omnis too. But now it's like, I would rather pick a story out of the Gospels of how Jesus, how he dealt with people, how he reacted to things, how he lived his life, and then it helps me. I can unpack. Well, what's an attribute then that I see in the life of Jesus, and that points to who God is. That points to the Father. Then I can ask Jesus, well, then what does that mean for my life? You know, you were merciful here. You know, how have you been merciful to me? Where do I need mercy? You know, how can I, you know, have the confidence that you are a merciful God? So it brings it full circle.
Yes.
You know, from throughout the whole biblical story, but from the mind to the heart to the everyday life, how can I experience God like this? Makes it real.
It does make it real. And I'm thinking back to even maybe a personal story over the last couple of years, and really feeling challenged at times about when I think about how to put this, when I'm criticized, when I'm misunderstood, when somebody implies something I didn't mean. I spend a lot of hours in conversations with people, and I'm a human. And so thankfully at times it doesn't show on the face, but sometimes I'm like, whoa, that didn't feel very good. And I remember a few years ago, that was just, we talked about last episode, God works in these layers. And it was like, he began to help me see, you don't need to keep feeling that way unless you want to. Like, you can live differently.
Right.
And so I just said, Lord, I really want your help here. I recognize this is very triggering for me. Even if I don't show it on my face in that moment, hopefully for the sake of someone I'm with, it's still there. And at that time, the Lord just began to help me see, I am the God who sees in secret,
Yes.
and I reward. And that's one of His promises. I am this kind of God. I can see, Laura-Catherine, I can see in your heart. I can see the motive. I can see where you're coming from.
Right.
You may have done or said this with a beautiful motive, and maybe it was misunderstood. Maybe
Right.
it was objected to. But it wasn't until I saw that in Him and really began to receive that I feel like there was a change.
Yes.
There's a genuine change where then in those moments, it wasn't so triggering. I can't say I love it. It's not wonderful to be misunderstood or to be someone to imply you meant something different or for them to sort of shut down what you're saying. It's not like I seek that out. But it changed. But it changed because I recognized He is here. He is with me, and He sees in my heart, and He understands.
Yes.
And He understands where I'm coming from, and He knows my motive was good here. And then I was different. But I think that's like some of what you're talking about, that we learn these things about God, and as we meditate on those and they become real, then it comes into our real life, and we do see change take place inside of us.
Yes, and also, Jesus can, pull out that little trigger that got like that little arrow that went into the heart. He can pull it out, so to speak, and minister to that place in your life. Encourage you, bring healing, help you to forgive. All of those things. Those are very practical.
Yes.
And if we encounter Jesus like that, we let Him into our lives like that. Yes, then he's our helper, right? And he comes and He brings healing. He brings redemption. He can bring things full circle. He can lift the burden off. It's very real.
Do you remember any times when that's happened for you? Any times where you're like, there was a way that I maybe saw God at one point in my life or my walk, and then now I see Him so differently?
Definitely. Many, many times.
Yeah.
I used to, one of the big challenges is, that we tend to relate to God as to how we related to an authority figure in our life. For example, a parent, maybe a teacher, or maybe even a religious leader like a pastor or something. And I know in my own personal life, my father was he was a very quiet man, and he was more distant emotionally. And so unconsciously, when I became a Christian at the age of 9, it was very sincere, but I brought that with me. And I thought that God was also emotionally distant. I didn't think it consciously, but unconsciously it was down there. And I had already learned as a child that if my father got mad or angry, he would stop talking, he would withdraw. So my concept of God, coming into the relationship with Him under the surface was, well, if I do something bad, God's not going to talk to me.
Yeah.
He'll give me the silent treatment, And I carried that with me into adulthood. Now, it's not true. Because God isn't like that. But
we don't know it's not
But
true.
I didn't know it wasn't true
Yeah.
because that's what I had experienced, from my own upbringing.
Yeah.
And I just transferred it over to my concept of God. I mean, we hear in church all the time, God's your father. Well, if God's my father, and this is the father that I've experienced, and I had a wonderful dad, but, he's human too. He was human too. And he had his, his ways. But this was a big one for me.
Yes.
I just thought that that's how God treated people. And when I finally realized, that, my gosh, no, Camille, God isn't like that. He's not going to give you the silent treatment. He's not going to cut you off emotionally because you did something wrong. He says, come to me, and all you who are heavy laden, come to me, and I will give you rest. Confess your sins and I will forgive you, He's a very approachable God, and so that was something that I carried around, for years. It was an unconscious belief about God that actually is very detrimental.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you really believe that God is distant and that he's going to give you the silent treatment, why would you come to him?
Yes. Yeah.
Why would you tell him anything?
Especially anything that might not be good.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And so, that finally broke, but I was an adult. And so, these are the things, that can happen in our lives and you don't even realize it many times. So we often have very, how would I put it? Very twisted ideas of God, that we've picked up from our family of origin or our culture and society, or even from a religious particular way of living. We've picked it up.
Yes.
And it's a caricature. It's not true. But under the surface, we actually believe it's true.
Yes.
And until that comes to the surface and you realize it and you can start to deal with it, it can change. But it's amazing what we often really think about God if we're honest.
Yes. Well, and I remember a number of years ago, it was a really challenging exercise because I grew up and I like to kind of be a goody two-shoes.
Yeah.
So it was like, this is hard. But I remember it was quite a few years ago now. And I just remember sensing that I needed to make like a list of how I see you, God. Like, how do I really actually see you? Like, what do I think you're like?
Yes.
And there, to me, there is something very powerful taking our thoughts and how we feel about something and either typing them out or writing them down or saying them out loud, where it goes from something that is there to being crisp and I really register that like that's there, and making this list of how I saw God. And I felt like he's going to be angry with me if I'm not good and I don't do everything right. And, he is very disciplined, and so he wants me to be very list structured, and of course it was such a blanking on the word, me projecting and like you're saying, out of my life, out of my experience, but also my personality, like, well, God is like me and God is like my world, because that's all I have to relate with,
right?
But I remember doing that, and I would maybe even encourage some of our audience, you may, as we go into the series, you may even want to consider, making that kind of a list of, what do I think God is like? What do I think his personality is like? How do I think he feels about me? And then as I did that, it was almost like seeing it, I began to realize this just doesn't match. Like, it doesn't match some of the Bible and the stories. But the Lord began to help me see, here's these things about me maybe you need to look into more deeply. And that learning then began to replace some of those perspectives that I had about God. And so it can be very rich, and also I think challenging, because it really does take the fabric of our belief and begin to kind of unravel it, and then it needs to be rebuilt.
Exactly right.
And it's like this wonderful, messy experience that we have.
So true. And what you're describing is the inner transformation. A change in our mindset, what we believe, a change that's taking place deeper in our soul, like in our heart.
Yeah.
And it's possible, and it continues on. I love it, because when we really begin to encounter the Lord personally, he's funny.
Yeah.
He's kind. He's faithful. He's loving. He just gets us. I remember number of years ago, I was driving from Florida up to South Carolina. I was driving from Florida up to North Carolina, but I was going to stop in South Carolina and visit an uncle of mine. And I had it all planned out so I wouldn't be on I-95, at night, because that's frightening.
Yes.
And so I had it all planned out. And then there was a big traffic jam in Jacksonville, Florida. We sat for like over an hour, never moved. And then this big rainstorm, and then it got dark, right? And I was like, oh, Jesus, please help me. I'm nervous. I don't like being out here at night in the rain on I-95. I'm scared. how much longer until I get to the exit? And I look up, and off to the side, there's a big billboard that says, "Smile, you're almost there." And and I'm like, and it was more than just a billboard. And now some people would say, "Camille, that's crazy," but it's not crazy. I had just prayed that, and I looked at this billboard, and I went, "God, you have an amazing sense of humor." And a few more miles,
did smile.
And a few more miles down the road, there was the exit, and I went, "Jesus, you are unbelievable."
Yes,
Those kinds of things.
Yes.
Where somebody asked me recently, Camille, how do you know? How can you hear God?
Yeah.
And I
Good
said, you know what? I said, the primary way of hearing God is through the scriptures. But God can speak in so many ways. He can speak through a billboard, a license plate, a video, a song, a conversation, a sermon, a book. He can speak however he wants, and he does.
Yes.
He speaks in ways that make sense to us, an image, a picture.
Yes.
And so he will communicate to us in a way that makes sense to us. And I know that night he spoke to me through the billboard, and I just cracked up laughing.
Yes.
And I was like, "Jesus, you are unbelievable," And it just meant so much to me because I was like, he's real.
Yeah, he's real.
This is not some distant supernatural force out there. No, this is a real God, a real relatable person who says, "I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I am the God who made heaven and earth. I am Yahweh." That's how he names himself in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Emmanuel, God with us in the person of Jesus. He's real.
Yes.
He's knowable.
Yes.
He wants to be known. And so his attributes, when we start encountering them, like his humor, that is like, I just love his humor.
Yes.
I just love his humor.
Yeah.
Many, many years ago, one of my nephew was just a little boy, and they were going to a church that was more of a charismatic kind of church, and so he observed that. Kids are just very observant. They just whatever they see, they imitate, right? And so, he had seen the pastor praying for people and laying hands on them and everything. And so one day I was at their house, and his mom, my sister, had baked a cake, and the cake wouldn't come out of the pan. She was shaking it and everything. It wouldn't come out of the pan. And my little nephew comes over, and he just said, "In the name of Jesus, come out." And the cake just fell out of the pan. So he's just simply,
there are some things that happen.
He's just simply, mimicking what he saw in faith that Jesus is real. If your cake won't come out, you can actually tell it to come out. You can pray. It's like the faith of a child, right?
Yeah.
No, and that's not a formula there's not a formula to follow. That's not, you don't create a theology out of it, but you just say, Jesus, he must have smiled.
Oh, yeah.
He must have laughed, right?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, and we see that in the Gospels. We see how much people wanted to be with him. Like they wanted to spend time with him, and he didn't seem like this far off, very religious, super unrelatable.
Unapproachable.
Yeah, unapproachable. He didn't seem that way. He was somebody people wanted to be with. And it's so neat, too, because it's like every age, all the ages wanted to relate with him.
Yes.
People from all different cultures wanted to relate with him.
Right.
Different stratospheres of financial and successful levels of that time. And they all wanted to relate and touch him and talk with him. And it's like, and that's who he is.
The people loved him.
They did.
The people that didn't like him were the power brokers.
Yes.
And
he was infringing.
He was infringing on their power. They didn't like him, but the people loved him because they said, "We've never seen anybody speak with this kind of authority."
Yeah.
Jesus went to weddings. He went to funerals. He went to people's homes.
Yes.
He didn't go to people's homes that were all perfect people. They were just normal people dealing with life and their own brokenness.
Yes.
And he hung out with them. He forgave them. He healed them. When you see him in action in the Gospels, you just think, wow.
Yeah.
But what a God.
Yes.
And he's the same God today as he was then.
Yes.
There's no difference.
No.
He does the same thing today, except we just can't see him.
No. Yeah, we can't see him, and then I'm even as we're talking, I'm thinking about, we see this a lot in the Psalms, we see it other places too, but how as we grow in that relationship with him, it also transitions from knowing these things about him to the place that we know him personally.
Yep.
We can know him that way today, and we see language like, "You are my shepherd."
Right.
You are my comfort. You are my hope. You are my joy.
Yes.
You are my provider. And all of a sudden that's experiential knowing.
It's experiential.
It's not you are powerful, all-knowing, omnipresent, like a fact list that's external from me. It's like, no, you are actually my comfort.
Right.
You are the one that gives me the power to earn wealth. And we begin to have that intimate relationship, just almost the same as we could sit here. Like if we weren't here and you were describing me, like describe Laura-Catherine, you would say, well, she's this way and she's this way and she's kind of quirky in that way and she's funny in this way. And I could do the same.
A real person.
Because it's a real person and it's a real relationship. And we know that, having spent time together in various settings, and God wants that. Oh my goodness, so much more with us than we can imagine, but than we could even ever want with the person we love more than anybody else in the whole world. Like he wants it more than that.
Yes, he does.
With each of us.
It's truly amazing. And I'm so grateful for it, because then, whatever life throws at us, we can have, where the Lord is with us in all of his attributes. I remember being in Belarus a number of years ago on a ministry trip, and they had sent me to the people I was working with, they had sent me on a bus by myself, to another location. I didn't speak any Russian. And they said, well, I got there just fine. And they said, well, when you come back by yourself, we're going to have the people tell the bus driver where to drop you off in Minsk, which is the capital, which is a huge city. So I didn't worry about it, right? I just figured he's going to drop me off. So we come into Minsk, and he's dropping people off. Pretty soon, like there's only two of us left on the bus. And I'm like, well, he hasn't dropped me off. And so I just said, I said something like, I raised my hand or something. He just says, get off. And he didn't even say it. He said it in Russian. It was like, get off. So I got off, and he put my luggage on the sidewalk and drove away. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know. I mean, I think I was at some kind of bus station, but I had no idea if it was the right one. My phone. This was back before this was the newer, like really new cell phones, and it was almost out of battery. I had no money. And I realized later that I even didn't have the right phone number, even if I had, somehow I had written it down. And clear as a bell, I'm thinking, my gosh, should I go to the embassy? Should I just go say I'm lost? What should I do? And if I leave here, nobody would have a chance of finding me. What should I do? And I said, Jesus, what should I do? Yeah. Clear as a bell in my mind. I felt like he said, there was a bench there. He said, sit down and relax. They'll be along. So I sat down with my suitcase next to the bench on this busy, bustling highway going through Minsk, and I just sat there. And about 15 minutes later, up pulls a white van, and this guy jumps out. He goes, we've been looking everywhere for you. He said, it's a miracle we found you. He said, I don't know what happened, what went wrong, but thank goodness we found you. I got in the van, and we went on our way. And I'm like, Lord, that's a personal God. A personal God. And what's ironic, though, Laura-Catherine, is I can experience that, and then I can come back to America and turn the TV on and hear them talking about, do you have enough money saved for retirement? And I'm like freaking out. And I'm like, Camille, what happened to the personal God you just encountered in Minsk? Don't you believe he's going to take care of you here in America when you get old? Yeah. So this dichotomy, many times we do experience the Lord, and then we have another incident in our life, and we're not trusting him. So it's an ongoing journey of learning to know the Lord, trust the Lord, and to experience him, personally. But I mean, He's amazing.
He is amazing. Well, and then too, and I'm thinking about what you're saying about even the TV, but now having walked with the Lord and recognizing the importance of knowing Him for who He is, there's an awareness for you when you have that happen. You go, wait a minute, I don't trust the Lord right here. This creates fear for me.
Absolutely.
This is something I need to bring into my conversation with you, God, and talk about, because this is scary. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about having a relationship with God is that we begin as we know Him more and more of who we are parts of our life, we start bringing to him and we start learning. And that's part of how we learn who He is, is through those experiences that we realize He's the God that can take care of me in the big city when I have no idea what to do. He's the God that can guide my family if we just lost our job and we have no idea what to do. He's the God that can help me with retirement.
Right.
And but we learn that, and that's when He's my peace.
Exactly right. He's my provider.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then also I love that, He's mine. But I also want to expand it out a little bit because, we live in such an individualistic culture. We can say He's our.
Yes. Because both are true.
He's our provider. He's my provider. For those of you listening in the audience, He wants to be
He does.
known by you in a very personal way. It's not theoretical. It's very day-to-day practical. How do I raise my children? How do I respond to this child at this moment in this situation? How do we manage our technology? How do we deal with our finances? How can I work on my marriage and make it stronger? How can I deal with conflict in the workplace? He's a very practical, down-to-earth God. And He showed us that by sending Jesus to be a practical man who made furniture.
Yes.
For 30 years, he just lived a normal life, and he grew up in a normal family with brothers and sisters and all that goes along with it. He learned a trade from his father. He was known in his town as the carpenter. It was only the last 3 years of his life that he really began his ministry as a rabbi. But 30 years, he knows exactly what it means to live normal life.
He does.
He knows.
He does. And then I love what you're saying about He's mine and He's ours, because He's the same God. And so He is that for me. He's that for us.
Yep.
He's that for the nations.
Exactly right.
Because he is who He is.
Yes.
And I love that, we also learn in His attributes that He never changes. He never... And thank goodness. Because He's so good. He does not change. And so I can read the scriptures and read that He was that for these people in the scriptures. And that's part of why we want to know those stories. And like you said earlier, the snapshots, because He was that for them. He this many years later wants to be and is the same.
Exactly right.
For me. Yep. It's beautiful.
It is beautiful. And it's one big story.
Yeah.
And we're in it right now.
Yes.
At this time in world history.
Yes. We just happen to be on the other side of the back cover.
Exactly right.
Yeah. Well, this is going to be a lot of fun.
It is going to be fun.
It'll be an adventure, and it'll be fun to do it with you, because I know for both of us, it's like we know the Lord, but we also, to spend time together unpacking His attributes and talking more about Him. I know we're going to grow individually and together just in looking more closely at these things about who He is.
Yes.
And then looking at these stories and snapshots that reveal that. So I appreciate you helping me kick this thing off. And next time we'll start diving into those. Any thoughts you'd want to close with before we would wrap up for everybody?
I would just like to say, to those of you in the audience, the Lord really loves you.
Yeah.
And He wants to know you personally, and He wants to be known. He wants you to know Him. And it's possible. And so I'm excited for this series because I love the Lord and I want to keep getting to know Him better. And I want that for you too. And I know that's Laura-Catherine's heart for this whole series. So We'll have fun together. Looking forward to it.
Yes, we certainly will. And thank you for joining us. I don't say this because it's us here and somehow we're extra special, but I don't think it's an accident that God maybe has this material in front of you. He does want you to know him, and he does want you to know him intimately and personally. And he does want to touch those places in your life that you would like to know him or be close to him and maybe don't know how. That's important, more important to him than it even is to you. So it'll be a wonderful adventure together as we explore the different attributes of God and these stories in the Bible that teach us more about him. So we'll begin to dive into that next time. Hope you have a great next few weeks, and we'll look forward to seeing you then.